From the Toronto studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Zahra Syed. Our top story tonight. On the 24th day of conflict, Palestinians in northern Gaza report fierce air and artillery attacks as Israeli tanks and troops launch a ground assault on the besieged enclave. Intense Israeli airstrikes were reported from the Tel al-Hawa area of Gaza, where the Al-Quds hospital is located. According to the Gaza's Ministry of Health, 93 casualties were reported in Khan Yunis in 24 hours. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, 8,306 Palestinians, including 3,457 children, have been killed and 21,048 people wounded. Adding 1,500 Palestinian soldiers who Israel killed in October 7th attack, the total reaches 9,806. 124 medical personnel were killed, and 25 ambulances are out of service due to Israeli attacks and fuel shortages. Meanwhile, in the occupied West Bank, which is not ruled by Hamas, 5 Palestinians were killed by Israel. On the Israeli side, more than 1,538 people have been killed since the Gaza conflict began on October 7th, with 823 bodies identified and 715 already buried, according to public broadcaster KAN. Israel has said it will prevent billionaire Elon Musk from providing internet access to Gaza with a satellite-based communication system, Starlink. Communications Minister Shlomo Karhi says Israel will use all means at its disposal to fight Musk's decision. The billionaire CEO and owner of Tesla and X wrote on the platform that Starlink would extend services to the internationally recognized aid organizations in Gaza. Israel cut off communication networks, causing a full blackout in the besieged enclave late Friday. Communications and internet services in Gaza were completely cut off amid heavy Israeli bombing of feeder lines, towers, and networks. 2 months before Hamas attacked Israel, the U.S. began expanding its secret military base, Site 512, in Israel's Negev desert. The Pentagon awarded a multi-million-dollar contract for the project, which is primarily a radar facility to monitor missile threats to Israel, according to The Intercept. The American online news service reports the expansion includes construction of a life support facility for personnel. The $35.8 million facility was mentioned tactically in a Pentagon contract announcement and is part of the secret Site 512. The Intercept reports the purpose of the secrecy is believed to be diplomatic or political, as acknowledging the existence of the base could lead to complications in the Middle East. In 2017, there was a rare recognition of the U.S. military presence in Israel when a military site was inaugurated. It was initially described as the first American military base on Israeli soil. The U.S. military later emphasized it was merely a housing facility for U.S. soldiers working on an Israeli base. This expansion is seen as part of the U.S. government's broader strategy to counter Iranian influence in the Middle East with an increased military presence in the region. In a global show of solidarity, pro-Palestinian activists took to the streets in major cities, demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Protesters converged on Washington, D.C., assembling in front of the White House before marching towards the State Department. Demonstrators carried banners and passionately voiced their opposition to Israeli military actions in Gaza. In New York City, thousands of pro-Palestinian demonstrators carrying banners and Palestinian flags marched from the Brooklyn Museum to Union Square. Chicago saw thousands march with the Chicago Coalition for Justice in Palestine in downtown, urging a ceasefire and calling for the U.S. to halt its support for Israel. In Detroit, Michigan, a woman waved the Palestinian flag during a march through downtown, demanding an immediate ceasefire and condemning Israeli attacks in Gaza. On the West Coast, thousands gathered near San Francisco's Ferry Building and proceeded to march along Market Street. They joined the global chorus, protesting recent Israeli actions and calling on the U.S. to cease its support for Israel. The Israeli military announced an expansion of its air and ground operations in Gaza, following relentless airstrikes that began after Hamas's surprise offensive on October 7th. International aid agencies reported losing contact with their staff in Gaza as Israel disrupted internet and communication services last week. Gaza's 2.3 million residents are facing severe shortages of food, water, and medicine due to Israel's bombardment and blockade. The United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution calling for an immediate humanitarian truce. The resolution, proposed by Jordan, received support from 120 states, intensifying the global call for a ceasefire, but Israel rejected it. The U.S. Senate unanimously passed a resolution Friday condemning what it called anti-Israel, pro-Hamas student groups in response to widespread student protests. Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace led hundreds of students from multiple universities demanding a Gaza ceasefire and an end to U.S. military support for Israel. The Senate resolution is part of a broader trend involving government and corporate actions against demonstrations related to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Recent weeks have witnessed government pressure on student activist groups, public blacklists in various industries, and politically motivated job terminations based on workers' public views regarding the conflict. Dima Khalidi is founder and director of Palestine Legal, an advocacy organization for Palestinian rights in the U.S. She reports that there has been a significant surge in legal assistance requests, noting 300 new cases in just 2 weeks, compared to a typical full-year workload of 2,200 cases between 2014 and 2022. The Israel-Palestine conflict has long been a divisive issue for free speech advocates in the U.S. Recent events have highlighted a stark divergence in perspectives, with the wave of speech suppression receiving little opposition and, in some cases, endorsement from elected officials. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis ordered the shutdown of Students for Justice in Palestine and its protests in solidarity with Palestinians. Donors to prestigious universities have also threatened to withdraw funding over student protests and public statements related to the conflict. The domestic dispute over Gaza and Israel may emerge as a political issue in the 2024 U.S. presidential election. Some politicians are discussing ideological screening of immigrants and visa cancellations for perceived Hamas supporters. The Turkish-Palestinian Friendship Hospital for Cancer Patients in Gaza has been severely damaged by Israeli airstrikes. Hospital Director General Dr. Subhi Skek said on Facebook that cancer patients and medical staff are panicked as a result of heavy Israeli bombardment on the Turkish Friendship Hospital. He said the bombing increased the suffering and pain of cancer patients and deprived them of medication. The Turkish government funded the hospital's construction from 2011 to 2017. It is the largest hospital in Palestine with an area of 34,800 square meters, 6 floors, and a capacity of 180 beds. Hundreds of pro-Palestine demonstrators stormed Makhachkala Airport in Russia's Dagestan region, temporarily suspending all flights. They were responding to the arrival of a flight from Israel. The airport shutdown prompted authorities to intervene, and police were dispatched to manage the situation. Social media footage showed protesters waving Palestinian flags and even inspecting the passports of passengers from the Israeli flight. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office issued a statement, expecting Russian law enforcement to protect Israeli citizens. In a separate incident, a Jewish center in the city of Nalchik in the nearby Republic of Kabardino-Balkaria was set on fire. Russian aviation authorities cleared the airfield of unauthorized people, but their airport will remain closed to incoming flights until November 6th. Dagestan's regional government expressed support for Gaza, but urged citizens to remain calm and not disrupt airport operations. The Supreme Mufti of Dagestan, Sheikh Ahmed Afandi, also called for restraint and urged an alternative, peaceful approach to address the issue. More than 250 Palestinians were forced to leave their homes and lands due to an ongoing violence and attacks by Israeli settlers. Far-right Jewish settlers also stormed the Al-Aqsa mosque in occupied East Jerusalem Sunday. Israeli police were present during the raid, intensifying concerns about settlers' actions being protected by Israeli forces. According to the Palestinian Foreign Ministry, Jewish settlers backed by Israeli forces attacked residents of Zanuda village in southern Hebron. Adel Al-Tal, a resident of Zanuda village, expressed his frustration, saying the villagers endured numerous assaults but had reached an intolerable breaking point. Residents were forced to relocate to nearby Ad-Dahariya, leaving behind their ancestral agricultural lands. The United Nations Humanitarian Affairs Office reports Israeli settlers have been responsible for 800 attacks against Palestinians across the West Bank from January to September. Notably, these attacks have escalated following the outbreak of violence on October 7th between Palestinian groups and Israel in Gaza. An estimated 700,000 Israeli settlers currently live in 164 settlements and 116 outposts within the occupied West Bank. All Jewish settlements in the occupied territories are considered illegal under international law. British singer Yusuf calls for Gaza ceasefire. Details come after the break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. British singer Yusuf, formerly known as Cat Stevens, made a passionate plea for peace in Gaza, addressing a massive pro-Palestine gathering in Istanbul. Speaking before a crowd of more than 500,000, he invoked his iconic song, Peace Train, and expressed his unwavering belief in the cause for peace, humanity, and a free Palestine. Islam urgently called for an end to the ongoing bombardment of innocent families, their homes, and particularly young children who have suffered the most in the conflict. He expressed gratitude to Turkey for its stance on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where relentlessly Israeli airstrikes have persisted for 3 weeks. Islam stressed the disproportionate nature of the conflict, emphasizing the importance of protecting women, children, and non-combatants in accordance with Islamic principles. He appealed to Israelis to revisit the teachings of the Torah and abandon the path of destruction, reminding them of the fundamental commandments against killing, stealing, and coveting others' property. Islam emphasized the shared heritage of the Holy Land amongst the family of Abraham, highlighting it extends beyond religious boundaries. He added that Zionism is a political movement rooted in a different historical context and has no direct connection to the Palestinian people. More than 32,000 buildings in Gaza have been destroyed by Israeli bombardment. Head of Gaza Media Office Salame Maroof said more than 200,000 buildings were hit by Israel's airstrikes so far. Israeli forces bombed 80 government buildings, destroyed 47 mosques, and caused damage to 3 churches. Israeli army spokesperson Daniel Hagari on Saturday said Israel is expanding its operations and moving to the next phase of our war against Hamas. Afghanistan has established a commission to manage the significant influx of Afghan refugees returning from Pakistan. Pakistan set a November 1st deadline for illegal migrants to leave the country or face forcible expulsion. Taliban Minister of State Maulvi Abdul Salam Hanafi will head the high-level commission. The 31-member body was formed on the instructions of the Taliban's supreme leader, Mullah Hibatullah Akhundzada. The Pakistani government intends to seize the property of those who do not comply with the request within the time limit. It has also formed a special task force to crack down on illegally constructed properties throughout the country. To assist returning Afghan refugees, the Taliban government has established 12 committees to provide identification, medical care, and temporary housing. They have assured citizens they can return to their homeland without fear. According to the latest UN figures, about 1.3 million registered Afghan refugees are in Pakistan, with another 880,000 having legal residency status. This month, more than 60,000 Afghan refugees reportedly opted to return to their country voluntarily. In related news, the Pakistani government's crackdown on illegal immigrants has thrown the fate of 18 Uyghur families into turmoil. Along with thousands of Afghans, they are also at risk of deportation. Pakistan has set a deadline of November 1st for the illegal migrants to leave the country. Otherwise, they will face forcible expulsion. Pakistani authorities issued the order after 2 suicide bombings in September, citing the involvement of Afghan nationals in most such incidents this year. The order also affects Uyghur families, which include about 100 people who do not have valid passports and Pakistani resident permits. Omar Khan, founder of the Pakistan-based Uyghur Trust, says the United Nations Office for Refugees in Pakistan contacted them after the media reported their predicament. The agency has been collecting information on the Uyghurs, but has not provided any updates on their status. The Uyghurs are now being pressured by their landlords to vacate their homes by November 1st, creating uncertainty and difficulties in finding alternative housing. These Uyghur families fear deportation to Afghanistan, which is currently controlled by the Taliban, or to China, where Uyghurs in East Turkestan, which is the Chinese government calls Xinjiang, face severe repression and human rights abuses. International human rights lawyers and organizations are calling for the protection of these Uyghur families in Pakistan. They stress that no government should deport Uyghurs to countries where they face torture or serious human rights violations in accordance with international law. That's all from our Toronto studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.